Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear all students. Welcome to the histotechniques. Today we will discuss the troubleshooting in fixation. The outlines of today's lecture is the choice of fixative based on technique, that for which technique which one fixative is the best and that is recommended. The second, we will discuss about the fixative of choice according to the tissues. So, what kind of fixative should be used for which type of tissue. Third, we will discuss about the artifacts, different types of artifacts during the process of fixation. And in the last, we will discuss about the troubleshooting in fixation, what are the problems, what is the causes, and how these problems, how these errors can be removed during, if it is occurred during the process of fixation. So, the first one is the choice of fixative based on technique. So, these are the list of techniques and the choice of fixative. For routine histopathological procedure, the choice of fixative is 10% neutral buffered formalin, and its properties are already discussed in our previous lecture. Then for the electron microscopy, the best choice of fixative is glutaraldehyde solution or osmium tetroxide, depending on the type of the tissue which is under study. For immunohistochemistry, the choice of fixative is 10% neutral buffered formalin, or we can also use alcoholic formalin. For immunofluorescence, the choice of fixative is not preferred, but for that purpose the tissue is directly sent to the lab and they are processed in the cryostat directly. And for the enzyme histochemistry, a fresh frozen section is performed. So, the techniques and their choice of fixatives. Now, the choice of type of fixative according to the tissue type. So, these are the list of the tissues, the fixative and the time during which processing is performed. So, for day to day routine sample and routine histopathology, we used 10% buffer formalin, and this buffer formalin can fix the smaller tissue within 6 hours or up to 6 hours, and if larger tissues are placed in this fixative, then it can take from 12 to 24 hours. If the tissue type is lymph node, so for that we use B5 fixation. The time for the B5 fixation is 18 hours. So, in that 18 hours the lymph node can be fixed in B5 fixation. For the tissue, or if there is any type of tissue or organ, 10% buffer formalin is used and the fixation time is 6 hours. If testis is processed in histopathology lab, for that 10% buffer formalin or Boyne's fluid is used, and 6 hours is the time of fixation for that process. For bone marrow tissues, they are fixed in Boyne's fluid and the time of fixation is 3 hours. The spleen or related organs, they are fixed in Zenker fluid and the time is 6 hours for the fixation. The eye specimens, they are fixed in 10% buffered formalin and their time of fixation is 48 hours. Now, the different artifacts that comes during the process of fixation, the first one of them is the formalin pigment. During certain situation, if the unbuffered formalin is kept for a long time, so then it is converted into a formic acid. This formic acid is a colored compound which reacts with the derivatives of hemoglobin from the blood, and they produces acid formaldehyde hematine. This acid formaldehyde hematine is insoluble and it appears as a brownish black granular refractile birefringent pigment. So, this pigment is an artifact that causes disturbance, and during the microscopy of the tissues, so that cannot be studied properly. That is why this artifact should be removed. This is the tissue which shows the artifact, the pigments which is produced by using the unbuffered formalin. Here we can see in this image, this is the area where colored are produced and here a smaller area. So, how we can remove this pigment, how this issue can be resolved? First, the tissue is immersed in xylene and then it is put into alcohol, so to bring in water for rehydration purpose. Subsequently, after alcohol, the tissue is immersed into 1.8% picric acid solution and in absolute ethyl alcohol for 15 minutes. After processing and putting in alcohol, the tissue is washed thoroughly with the normal saline or simple water, and then the sections are restrained and examined under microscope. Another artifact, that is the mercury pigments. These pigments are produced when tissue is fixed by mercury chloride and it produces dark brown color spots which are irregular and their boundaries are not clear. The location of this artifact affects the whole tissue and these pigments are spread throughout the tissue. So, how can we remove these artifacts? These artifacts are removed with the application of iodine. The iodine converts these mercury pigments into mercuric iodide, and then this mercuric iodide is removed by sodium thiosulfate. The next artifact is the fuzzy staining or uncleared or hazy staining. In this type of artifacts, nuclear or cytoplasmic details, they are covered and the tissue or the section, it looks like fuzzy or hazy and the details are not clearly visible, and this artifact is caused by the improper fixation. This improper fixation may be either due to insufficient amount of the quantity of fixation, or if the time is not proper and the fixation time is less than the required or the preferred time. So, this can cause the fuzzy staining of the tissues. If the tissue is prolonged fixed for longer time, then this causes shrinkage of the tissue, and after shrinkage there is a separation between different parts of the tissue. So, in some tissues the holes or empty spaces appear, and we can see in this image these are the different parts of the tissue. Here are the empty spaces within the tissue, and this is caused by the prolonged fixation, which results in the shrinkage of the tissue. This is a table which shows the problem, their causes and the remedies. So, the problems, the first one is the nuclear margin is indistinct, uncleared, and the nuclei, they are fuzzy or hazy and show bubbles. This problem is caused by the incomplete or the improper fixation. To cover this issue, to solve this issue, first check the concentration of the formalin. If the concentration of the formalin is not proper, so make it proper or put the tissue in the buffered formalin. The second remedy is keep more time in formalin for fixation. Proper time is required for each tissue, and if the tissue is larger, so then cut it into thin sections for the fixation purpose. And do not put too many cassettes together in one jar, it also creates this problem. So, these are the remedies for this fuzzy staining with bubbling. The second issue is the tissue shrinkage with large artifactual spaces. This problem is caused by poor fixation or prolonged fixation, and this problem is resolved by giving proper time of fixation and avoid prolonged fixation. Second, check the concentration of the fixative, that it should not be very concentrated. And third is immediately fix the tissue after collection and reception at the histopathology lab. Another problem is insoluble brownish granular pigment. This pigment is formed by formalin due to the production of formaldehyde hematine, and this formaldehyde hematine, they react with the blood. So, the solution of this issue is that use buffer formalin for fixation. And intraepithelial cleft formation is the last problem which is discussed today. This is caused by the formalin which may evaporate and the calcium carbonate is precipitated. So, to resolve this issue, we must keep the formalin in closely kept bottle so that the formalin do not evaporate. That was all for the troubleshooting in the tissue fixation. You can further look through these books for advanced studies. Thank you. If you have any question, you can ask through the question box. Assalamu alaikum.